Hello and welcome to the Delta Sigma podcast, Fraternally Submitted. I'm your host, Angel Sanchez, and today we'll be covering over the beginnings of the music department here at UTA. I am joined by Thomas Posavac. Sorry about that.
Not the first time.
And let's see, you're basically what, the unofficial historian of the music department?
Well, I'm an alumni. I'm also the events manager and just became the historian. It started with wanting to learn the history of the Fine Arts Building, and then I realized we know nothing about our department. And I just started digging.
Well, before we get to all of that, tell us, your brief history with the university, what you've been doing all this time.
Well, I came to UTA in fall of '95 as a transfer from another school to begin my degree, to continue my degree in music education. Graduated in December of '98 with my degree in music ed without the certification.
Oh.
It just didn't seem right at the time, so decided to pursue other efforts. Then, long story short, after a couple other educational stops, I ended up coming back here in the fall of 2008 as the events manager. And boy, has this place grown.
Just your own personal history will be an episode on itself.
It could be because, as you'll find out in talking with your other guests, there have been so many great players, great faculty that have come through here that it also helps spark my, historic research. Who else has been here? When? What ties do they have? And yes, that is a tease to other interviews later.
Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes, shall we? So, we're talking about the first 30 years of the music department, right?
Yeah.
All right, so...
and that's one of the things that I found out beginning of this research. We never knew when it began. One crazy time we had the Tremont Day here, and a lady came over and said, "Oh yeah, I work on the other part of the campus. I didn't know we had a music department." And she's like, "Well, when did it start?" I'm like, "Well, at least 1925." And I'm like, "That doesn't sound right," And that was another spark to start this. But as I went through, I realized that in September 1895, when Arlington College was founded, music was one of 6 teachers on campus. And our first teacher was Miss Sally Mae Heiter. It's not Hater. I found that pronunciation for me later.
Okay.
And she was one of the 6 teachers. And you've got some photos there, all in the original schoolhouse, which no longer exists. I'm trying to open this up right now so we can see it bigger. And so it was just a kind of, the same as anything during that period, a large schoolhouse with different large classrooms. One of the things that was interesting was her salary was not guaranteed. She was in as a special teacher. So her salary came from the fees collected for private lessons.
So like adjunct or even
less than that. The teacher was paid directly by the students.
Oh, so just like high school.
Yeah,
like
a lot of people teach lesson teachers now. It went straight to the teacher.
Okay.
But she had a space to teach and did other things for the department.
And then was she just teaching music in general, or is it just one specific?
Just general music, but one of the things that I really found, and most of what I've found has been through the UTA Special Collections, which I owe them a huge debt of gratitude, is we actually have a report card from when it was still Arlington College, so somewhere between 1895 and 1902. And it lists Fine Arts Department. We see piano, violin, mandolin, guitar, voice, harmony, music history were all taught. There were different subjects that she taught. And so she had to be a very well-rounded teacher. But I don't know anything on her educational history. From the last name and other sources, I was able to find out the Heiter family was well known in Arlington. So they were an affluent family in Arlington. But where she taught or where she went to school to learn music, I don't know.
Okay. Next thing here I have here is so was she in charge of the orchestra you're mentioning here then after that, or are we not sure?
In my notes you see orchestra is in quotation marks because I think that is kind of a misnomer for the word orchestra. I think in early settlements here in the U.S., they would use orchestra for anything for a combination of different instruments. So we don't know if it was all violin, mandolin, guitar playing together or what it was.
It was whatever group they had.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is a lot of people mistake, the West as it was back then as being devoid of culture. It's not. Even going back to 1888, we see that Arlington had a brass band.
Okay. Was it like do we know if it was like the European style, or was it just...
No, I believe it was probably still more remnants of the Civil War brass band.
Okay.
I found a newspaper article mention of it, but actually in my hometown around that same time, I found a source that actually had a photograph of their brass band, and it looked just like kind of the Civil War brass band. Some of the over-the-shoulder stuff, different cornets, B-flat, E-flat, some of the alto horns in there. So Arlington, even before the founding of Arlington College, had music existing in the city as a, civic and just sheer entertainment. So the fact that they would have music in the founding of the college is not, that far of a stretch.
And then you say you have a picture of the opera house?
Yes. It no longer exists. It was torn down, I believe in the 19-teens. So if you're looking at the photograph, it's the large 2-story white building on the far left. In that period, the opera house kind of took two forms. Sometimes it was just the second story of a downtown business. This one included several storefronts, so it's a rather large space, and most likely a raised stage on one end of the building. Other ones in the town are much more like a modern theater that you would see. In my hometown of Granbury, they have the opera house there that was very much a theater, designed mostly for the very early vaudeville traveling musicians. The other thing with the opera house, this was kind of closest to the intersection of Pecan Street and Main Street. And so with that, this picture was from around 1908. Just south of Main Street is Abram. And that's where the... you'll probably need to edit this part out.
Can't remember.
The early mass transportation that we used to have in Arlington, and it was an electric train that ran between Dallas and Fort Worth. So even if there was something showing here that people in Dallas wanted to see, they could come out. People from Fort Worth could come out and see.
And we don't have it anymore.
No, that was torn out in the 1930s.
And here we're complaining about.
Yes, it's as you'll see, that's still a problem. So it was nice because it was real close to the transportation, but that could also bring the artists in as they're traveling the country and touring. They had a nice stop here, could perform the next night in Fort Worth, and then continue on from there.
So just based on that, most of I forgot how to pronounce her name. Heiter. So I'm guessing like whenever she had ensembles or stuff, they would just go over to this little opera house as the main part.
We know that there was a commencement there in 1896 and 1898. We have scans of that. So we know it was used for commencement. As far as everyday recitals, I'm not sure. they may have done a similar thing as use local churches. And that's one of the toughest things between Arlington College folding and the next iteration moving away. We've lost a lot of documents, which is why I've been happy to find what I've had so far, but I want more. I always want more information.
Yeah, there's clear gaps here. And because the next thing you say, we jumped to 1904 on your outline here.
And the UTA history and the Carlisle Military Academy came next. Very much, as the name says, military school, founded in that in that style of school. They took most of the students, I think almost 80% of the students, up to the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, which I think for students in the middle of North Texas to go to a city like St. Louis had to have been eye-opening.
Yeah.
It may have been their first time out of state on a train to go up there. But while they were there, they were with other military schools, and they went to an Army base where they participated in parade maneuvers with other groups. And for me, that's where I think the idea of getting their own band came into play. Because they realized, you've got a military school. Well, you need a military band to play for them to march in parades. And so when they come back from that, we see the arrival of James Albert Alt. That name took me months to find. As we talked briefly before, there was a paper about military science history on our campus. And they just mentioned a J.A. Alt. And it took me forever to find him. So he is the first director of bands on campus. And what's interesting with him is he's also connected to Tarleton State, North Texas, University of North Texas, and both of his daughters taught at the College of Industrial Arts, now Texas Women's University.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Interesting fact, Texas Women's University has the first 4-year degree in music in the state of Texas.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know about that.
And so both of his daughters taught violin up there, but the rest of his family was also involved in music. His son owned Alt Music, which was in downtown Fort Worth. And Mr. Alt also, had his own orchestra and band that he would have advertised, that I can come and play at this function or that function, just kind of whatever you want. And so he was a very, entrepreneurial musician in Dallas Fort Worth, and a very early one. He's also tied to the early bands in downtown Fort Worth from the old meatpacking industries.
Well, bunch of very strange beginnings for the musicians here.
Yes, but it was also the society thing back then. A lot of just as a social outlet, large companies would have maybe a choir or a band or an orchestra to play in when they're done. And so that's what some of those groups were. But it was also beneficial for him to say, someone needs to sell them instruments. And his family gets into it.
When there's business, there's business.
So what a coincidence. I often wonder, could he have been the foundation for the Music Man? I don't know. But at least he didn't try and, skip out on a town with all the money. And
then it says here you have a picture of the oldest band here.
Yes, the earliest photo I was able to find was in the Carlisle Military Academy, and we believe it was somewhere in the year 1909, 1910. This was the kind of the pinnacle of the Carlisle Military Academy period. When we reached a certain level, the Army would send us officers to help train our students.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1909, they sent us Captain Harry Enos Alden, who was with the regular Army. I believe he was based in El Paso before he came to Arlington, then went back to El Paso. But as part of that, they also bought $1,500 worth of distant brass instruments and cases. I think a couple years ago I looked it up. It's about $45,000 worth of instruments now. So not a small purchase. So when you have a large purchase, you take a large photo.
Yeah, and so look, I'm seeing like what I assume looks like. Well, it looks to me like a concert tuba while they're marching, but they're probably not concert tubas, but.
No, they're concert tubas.
Oh my gosh! So they're
because if you're, I'm old enough that I've seen tubas that they have straps that you wear standing up, and that's how they would march.
I want one for myself. That would be nice. That'd be nice for those kind of gigs.
So yeah, it's great to have a sousaphone.
Mm-hmm. But man,
were sousaphones invented at the end? I don't remember that part of my music history.
I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't.
But no, it's okay.
Oh my gosh! So like on this picture, I'm
seeing. So yeah, there's tuba, euphonium, what appears to be an alto horn as well. I think there might be two of them.
I was wondering what that
was.
And
a couple cornets.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of students may have had their own instruments, but you'd still need enough to outfit a full band.
And then they really have that military look with it's straight uniform. Wow.
Yeah, it was a military school. So that kind of fits later on. The next segment that we go to when we're kind of founded into grubs.
And that wraps up the first episode of Fraternally Submitted. I really hope you enjoyed it. So the next episode, we're going to go into what's left of this interview with Thomas, and it'll be talking about grubs, when we became Arlington College, seeing the construction of buildings that we recognize today, and from there, I've already have some other recordings lined up where I've talked to other alumni. So we're going to get to see a little bit more, just jumping around different times of our history of the music department and as Delta Sigma. So I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.